Welcome back to Luke's Properties YouTube channel. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to turn £12,000 into £216,000. Let's get into it. Okay, so just for context, here's me, and at this point, I was already around 6 months into starting my own rent-to-rent business. For those of you who don't know what rent-to-rent is where you rent a property from a landlord or an estate agent. You spend some money giving the property a cosmetic refurbishment, which consists of mainly painting, decorating, and furniture. You then re-rent the property out for a premium price to working professionals. You pay the landlord their guaranteed rent. You then pay all of the running costs associated with the property, so gas, electric, water, Wi-Fi, etc. And then what's left over is your profit as a business. So that's how rent to rent works in a nutshell. And at this point, I was already 6 months into building my business. So prior to this, I had spent 3 months learning how rent to rent works. So studying YouTube, podcasts, reading books, etc. And then I spent another 3 months implementing what I'd learned, going out there, speaking with agents, speaking with landlords, going on viewings, getting told no over and over again, but building relationships with estate agents and landlords. So at this point, I was 6 months into my rent to rent journey, and the point in time here is April 2018, the 28th to be exact. I remember this date so precisely because this is the exact date when I got the keys to my first rent to rent deal. My first rent to rent property was a 6-bedroom townhouse in Newport, South Wales. I found this property on Rightmove, and in the description, it was advertised as open to company lets. So when I read the description, I thought, great, I've been getting told no by all of these estate agents. We don't do company lets, we don't rent to companies, you're not the right tenant for us, etc., etc., for months. And finally, I'd found a property that was actually advertised as open to company lets. So I jumped at the opportunity. I called the estate agent of this property. I was in London at the time. I arranged a viewing. I got my father to go and view the property because he lives in South Wales. The viewing went well, and the following day, I put in an offer to rent this property. I agreed to pay £1,200 per month in guaranteed rent, and I had to pay 2 months upfront to the letting agent. I also had to pay an administration fee to the estate agent of around £250. So at this point altogether, I was around £2,650 into this deal. My father collected the keys, and I then drove down from London to Wales with my girlfriend, and we began working on the house. What the work consisted of was mainly some painting, some decorating here and there, mainly touching up because the property was in quite good condition. There was already some furniture in the property, but we decided on adding more furniture, mainly things like bedside tables, wardrobes, desks, and new beds. Because we were going to target working professionals, we wanted to furnish the rooms accordingly to those types of people. But because we wanted to keep our costs low, and this was our first rent to rent deal, so at this point we were still quite apprehensive. We weren't quite sure how this would work, but we knew we wanted to keep our costs low. So we actually got all of our furniture from the British Heart Foundation. We put some canvases up behind the beds, bought some lamps for the bedside tables, and we also bought some soft furnishings, and this all added up to around £1,400 to £1,500, which brought our total spend to around £4,000 invested. Now, prior to getting the keys to this first rent to rent property, I had been building relationships with estate agents and landlords, like I mentioned earlier. And one of my good friends at the estate agent where we got this first rent to rent property from, he messaged me and informed me that a gentleman had walked into the estate agents asking to rent this same property. The reason he wanted to rent this property was because it was very close by to where he was working. But because I had already put in an offer on this property, I ended up getting it first. So it turned out that the gentleman that walked into the shop asking to rent this property was a shipping engineer that worked in the area. And he wanted this property for 5 of his work colleagues. So my friend in the estate agent thought of me, gave me the contact information of this gentleman, and I gave him a call over the weekend. I simply asked him if he would be prepared to pay a premium for this property if we furnished it accordingly, set up all of the bills, the running costs in our company's name. Would they be willing to pay a premium for this house? He replied immediately and said yes. This was a huge moment for us as a business because not only had we got our first rent to rent property, but we were on the brink of finding our first tenants almost immediately. We got the house ready over the weekend, and by Monday morning, 6 contractors turned up. We moved them into the house. They paid their first 2 months rent to us. So after spending £4,000 on this house, getting it ready for these contractors, once they'd paid their 2 months rent to me, I then had £5,200 back into my account. And this was a massive turning point for me. This was the exact moment, I remember it so clearly, that I realised that rent to rent was real. So these contractors would pay me around £2,600 per month, and then I'd give the landlord their £1,200 a month in guaranteed rent. And that would leave me with £900 per month in profit. And as far as first rent to rent deals go, this turned out to be a sensational deal. I learned so much from this first deal, and I actually made some money, which a lot of people don't in their first rent to rent deal. Now, over the course of that first year, we made sure that we over-delivered in every way possible. Not only did we over-deliver for the contractors, the shipping engineers, but we also over-delivered for the landlord. So every time the rent was due, we'd make sure we paid on time, sometimes even early. There was a couple maintenance issues in the house in the first year. I remember a toilet piston breaking. Now, because we were still working through a letting agent, the letting agent was charging the landlord around 10% for managing the property. So that meant that any maintenance that needed to be done to the property was down to the letting agent to organise. So when the toilet piston broke in one of the bathrooms, the first person we contacted was the estate agent. Now, because this property was one of 200 properties on the estate agent's books, I remember this issue taking a few weeks to resolve, because they would speak with their plumber and their plumber would be booked up with other jobs, and weeks started to go by without the issue being solved. Now, rather than me having unhappy tenants, I took it upon myself to get my own plumber down there to fix the toilet piston, and it only cost around £40. So it wasn't a big deal. And if it meant keeping my tenants happy, then it was more than worth it. I also remember a lock on a window not shutting properly. Again, we spoke with the estate agents. That wasn't a priority for them. A couple weeks went by without this getting fixed, so I took it upon myself again to find my own tradesman to fix the lock on the window. Again, it didn't cost more than £50. We got it done, tenants were happy, problem solved. Now, all of these minor maintenance issues were documented in an email thread with the landlord and the estate agent. So the landlord could read through their emails and see that we were being far more proactive with managing the property than the estate agent. This is important, and I'll explain why later on in the video. But the main point I want you to get here is that once we got our first rent to rent deal, once we found our contractors to come and pay us a premium, the work didn't stop there. We made sure we over-delivered for the landlord by paying the rent on time every single month, sometimes early, making sure maintenance issues were fixed as soon as possible, not when the estate agent had time to do it. We also over-delivered for our contractor tenants, because anything they would need in terms of fibre optic broadband or a microwave or some new bedding or a new TV in the living room, anything they'd ask for, we'd get them so that they felt as comfortable as possible, because we wanted them to stay for as long as possible. We realised quite quickly that we'd found some really good tenants. So the more comfortable we could make them, the higher the chances of them staying. So we over-delivered to our landlord and we over-delivered to our tenants. So that was our first rent to rent deal. We invested £4,000 and we were making £900 per month on average in profit. Now, fast forward around 6 months, everything was going well. We were learning as we went and we wanted to grow. We wanted to get more properties just like this one, and we wanted to find more tenants just like these guys, because there wasn't much upkeep. We'd worked out a good margin where we were making money. Our customers were happy, our landlord was happy, the estate agent was happy. We had created the win-win scenario that we all want in business. So we wanted to scale, we wanted to grow, we wanted to find the same sort of houses, and we wanted to find the same sort of tenants. Around 3 months after getting our first rent to rent deal, I received a phone call from the CEO of this company. He informed me that he had another group of shipping engineers up in Scotland, in Glasgow, who were also looking for accommodation. Now, because that was out of our area, I wasn't willing to go and find a property and do a rent to rent deal, because the logistics weren't going to work. Our business was based in Wales and they wanted accommodation in Scotland. So it wasn't going to work as a rent to rent. However, going back to over delivering, I still put some time into finding accommodation for these engineers. So I phoned around 50 to 60 listings that I'd seen online on Rightmove to try and accommodate around 18 engineers. And again, I got told no by so many estate agents, until eventually I found one estate agent who was happy to do the deal. I was almost working as a relocation agent for this company. The estate agent that I spoke to, that I got on with, he understood the assignment, he understood exactly what we were trying to do, and he ended up renting us some apartments to accommodate these contractors. And for this service, I charged the CEO of this company £100 per person relocation fee. Now again, that wasn't life-changing money, but it was still income, But more importantly, going back to my point about over-delivering, again, I had over-delivered to these contractors. And every time you over-deliver, you build that trust, you build that rapport, and you become that company's go-to agent for finding accommodation. Then around 6 months after that, I got another phone call from the CEO of this company, and he informed me that he had another group of around 18 engineers that would be moving down to Newport, where we had our first rent-to-rent deal, and they needed accommodation too. Now, because I had been constantly marketing to all of the HMO landlords in this area for around 6 months prior to this, I had built relationships with a couple of the landlords on this same road, and I had put offers in on quite a few properties on this road, and the landlords of these properties decided to try and find tenants themselves rather than working with us, which was fine at the time. I let them know my offer was still on the table, and we didn't speak for a few months. But by the time I got the phone call from the CEO of this company, some of the landlords that I had been marketing to had been trying to find tenants for a few months. Some of them had found tenants, but things still weren't working exactly how they'd like them to. The problem with landlords trying to do self-management is sometimes they get distracted. They haven't always got the time to manage the HMO accordingly. They may have a busy job, family to look after, and oftentimes they don't end up running their HMOs like a business. They run them almost like a hobby around the rest of their life. And when you treat HMOs like this, oftentimes you get inconsistencies in tenancies. You also have void periods and empty rooms. So the landlords weren't happy with the situation they were in. So when I got this phone call from the CEO, I then phoned all of those landlords again, but because I had their contact information from marketing to them previously, and I just put my offer on the table again, asked them how things were going and if they'd like to work with us. And one landlord in particular, who owned 3 houses on the same road, was having issues with his HMOs. All 3 of his houses were tenanted with around 3 to 4 tenants rather than 6. So he wasn't receiving the maximum income that he could receive. And this particular landlord was approaching his 60s. He'd spent 30 to 40 years working hard, building up his portfolio. And when I spoke to him, I could tell that he was a bit disillusioned with the whole thing. He wasn't satisfied. He bought these houses to generate passive income, and every minute he was at the house fixing something, dealing with tenants, trying to fill the rooms, and these houses had become more of a burden to him than the passive income streams that he had hoped for. So I put my offer back on the table. This particular landlord was in pain from self-managing these properties, and he agreed that when these tenants that he had in these properties, who were only on short-term contracts, left, he would rent the properties to me for a guaranteed term, for a fixed income, exactly like our first rent-to-rent property. This was another huge breakthrough moment for me and the business. We then repeated the process from rent-to-rent number 1, and we took on rent-to-rent property number 2, 3, and 4, all in the same week. Now, our second rent-to-rent property only cost us £3,000 because this property was in better condition than our first property. It was already furnished. All we had to buy was soft furnishings. There was already beds, bedside tables, wardrobes in every room. We also negotiated a rent-free period, which basically means we didn't pay a deposit. We agreed a price with the landlord, and then he kindly gave us a few weeks grace period to go into the property, put the soft furnishings in, and start marketing. So rather than paying 2 months up front, we only paid 1. So we paid around £1,200 to the landlord for our first month's rent, and then we spent around £1,800 on over-delivering, on soft furnishings, and just making the property more appealing, more homely, and more comfortable. So rent-to-rent property number 2 cost us £3,000. We did the same again 2 doors down with rent-to-rent property number 3. That cost us £3,000. And then the final one, we had some soft furnishings left over from property number 2 and 3. So that one only cost us £2,000 to get started. So these 3 houses, we didn't have to pay a deposit. We only paid 1 month's rent, and we spent some money on soft furnishings. We got these houses ready over a week, and then we moved in 18 contractors from the same company that we had been working with in our first rent-to-rent property. And after all of the running costs and the guaranteed rent, each house made us around £900 per month in profit. And at this stage, I was really starting to see how this business was scalable and how we could grow. Not only grow for the sake of it, but grow in the right way, by repeating the process, by renting the same type of house and renting to the same type of tenants. We had a formula here that we could repeat and repeat and repeat, and each house would make us £900 per month in profit. Now we were really starting to build momentum, and at this stage, we were making £3,600 per month in profit from controlling 4 properties that we don't even own. So we've had these properties for around 5 years, and the profit that we've made over those 5 years has been £216,000. Obviously, we've had to pay around 20% corporation tax on that profit. We haven't had any void periods because those same contractors have been in those houses for 5 years. We didn't have to pay any cleaning costs. Instead, we bought the tenants everything they'd need to clean themselves, so hoovers, cleaning equipment, everything you could think of. They were quite efficient and they were quite neat and tidy and clean tenants. So just to summarize, guys, it took us 6 months from incorporating our business, learning how rent to rent works, and practicing over and over again, getting told no on numerous occasions, to eventually getting the keys to our first rent to rent property. We invested £4,000 into that first rent to rent property, and because of all of the networking that I was doing with estate agents and landlords, it only took us 2 days to find the perfect tenants for this property. And after they paid us our premium rent and after all of the bills, we were left with £900 per month in profit. We over-delivered to those tenants, we over-delivered to the landlord. And around 6 months later, we then accommodated another 18 tenants from this same company in 3 more HMOs on the same street as our first rent to rent property. Our second deal cost us £3,000, our third deal cost us £3,000, and our fourth deal cost us £2,000. And each of these properties made us £900 per month in profit, which left us with a monthly profit of £3,600 a month, and over 5 years that added up to £216,000. These are the highlighted moments of our first year in rent to rent. However, there were lots of times in between these moments where I was working, networking, building relationships without making any money. All of the energy that I put out eventually started to compound over time, and then eventually we got to this stage where we were making £3,600 per month from 4 properties that we don't own with the same group of tenants in each house. I want you to know that you could do this too. There's nothing special about me other than the fact that I'm quite determined, and if I want something, I'll keep going every day, every week, every month until I get it. And I really wanted to build a rent to rent business of my own. So whenever I would get setbacks or meet an obstacle, I would work out a way around it and I'd keep going. Even when landlords told me no, I would take it gracefully. I'd leave my offer on the table and I'd ask them to contact me in the future if they ever want to work with me. I over-delivered for these contractors, and because of that, I ended up housing around 24 to 25 employees from the same company in 4 houses on the same road. All of this came from staying committed, doing the things that I knew would work over and over and over again. This didn't happen overnight. As I said, these are the highlights of this first year in rent to rent, but there were also lots of days, lots of down days where I didn't make any progress, where I was getting told no often. And there were times throughout that period where I thought maybe this isn't going to work, but I didn't let my thoughts dictate my actions. I'd wake up on a Monday morning, get back on the phones, start calling landlords, start calling agents. I would relentlessly keep marketing to these people over and over again until eventually I got to my dream outcome. So there's no reason why you couldn't do this too. If you're a similar type of person to me and you're quite determined and you want to build your own rent to rent business, then you could do this too. Now, if you want someone to help guide you through this process, then I'll leave a link in the video description below. Click the link and book in a free call with myself. And on that call, we'll be able to discuss your plans moving forward. And if you need a mentor to help speed up this process for you, then there'll be an option on the call for us to work together, if we're the right fit for each other. If you want to watch another video where I break down exactly how to build your rent to rent business step by step, then watch this video next. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and as always, I'll see you on the next one.